Hello, and welcome to another Rant Rave review. Today, we will be ranting and raving about Slaughterhouse-Five and Godzilla Minus One. And you might think they have nothing to do with each other, which you might be forgiven. One of them, after all, is a poignant anti-war story about the effects of battle on both soldiers and civilians, especially when civilians are killed, who had nothing to do with the war, but also sprinkles in sci-fi elements as a metaphor. The other story is Slaughterhouse-Five. Yes, I am comparing it unfavorably to Godzilla Minus One. Both of them, in theory, are sci-fi anti-war stories. One is effective and one isn't. And my thesis is, it boils down to anthropology, the way that the storytellers view the human person. Yes, so let's jump right in. Godzilla Minus One, if you haven't seen it, beg, borrow, and steal. No, pay money to go see it, to rent it, to stream it. It is fantastic. If your only experience of Godzilla is like big lizard smash thing, this is not that. And American Godzilla, it's almost always big lizard smash thing, and in Japanese Godzilla, it's sometimes big lizard smash thing. But sometimes it's like a biting critique of bureaucracy or nuclear power or blah, 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 blah. So, little backstory. The original, 1950s Godzilla was about, nuclear power, etc. They actually based the skin scales on him off of Nagasaki, Hiroshima burn victims. Deliberate metaphor, okay? He also has atomic breath. Okay, so Godzilla Minus One is sort of a prequel reboot of that first one. So again, it's happening right after the war. It actually starts basically at the very end of the war, where there's a pilot, a kamikaze pilot, and he lands on this little island, and he's like, oh my gosh, my plane's malfunctioning. I can't, fix my plane. And the mechanics look at it, and they're like, there's probably nothing wrong with this plane. He's basically chickening out. He doesn't want to kill himself. But it's, the end of the war, so it's does he really need to smash into a boat or, something, And they're on the little island that, in the lore, is the island that, worships the deity that is Godzilla. He's basically a sea monster spirit thing. Kaiju, if you will. They don't know that. I mean, they've heard legends. But then that night, when they're all hanging out, Godzilla attacks, and he's a rather large lizard, okay? Attacks, they're freaked out, and chaos ensues. Long story short, the pilot manages to make it into his plane and has a shot and could kill Godzilla, and he doesn't take it. And so, basically everybody dies, and it's his fault. He could have killed Godzilla. He didn't. He's a coward. Okay. Then he returns home. And this is, let me just say, the costumes and sets in this movie are just so not, they use CGI well, they use costumes well, it's just a well-done movie. It honestly, truly should have won an Oscar for, Best Picture. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not kidding. It's so good. He goes back home to Tokyo, and everything is burned down, because fun fact that Americans don't like to talk about, 3/4 of everything in Japan was bombed to heck before we even dropped nuclear bombs. The country was decimated. So he goes back home, his entire neighborhood is burned down, his parents have died, and his neighbor lady's children have died. And she comes up to him and she's like, what? You're supposed to have, died in the war. You're a kamikaze pilot. How dare you live when my kids died? And she's just angry at him. And he is, racked with guilt over not fulfilling his duty, not taking out Godzilla, coming back alive, survivor's guilt, raised to 11. And he also basically meets this woman who's taken in his baby, and they kind of make a little family, reluctantly, she's kind of sassy, and he's like, oh, I don't deserve to live. And the neighbor lady's like, oh, you're stupid, but, you don't know how to take care of a kid, and I do. I might as well take care of this kid, even though I hate you. So, yeah. And then also, he gets a job working basically on a ship that sweeps for sea mines, because, again, the effects of war are lingering and long-lasting. And so it's about 6 years after the war at this point. They've made themselves a little hut. They're rebuilding a life. He's still racked with guilt. And they keep repeating the phrase, like, is your war over yet? Again, this is a poignant meditation on, like, the effects of war on both the military, like, people, and civilians. And then you have Godzilla. So, the boat, he's out on a boat with these adorable little oh my gosh, they're so cute. All the characters in this movie are amazing. There's like a scientist and this one kid who like wanted to fight in the war but he was too young and all this stuff. They're on the boat sweeping for mines and they encounter this ship that's been destroyed by Godzilla. And then they encounter him, but he does not look the same as he does on the island because of nuclear testing in the Pacific. Metaphor. He's way bigger. He now has atomic breath. What's interesting in this movie, unlike other movies, is when he shoots his atomic breath, it shows that he has to like heal from it. Like he gets hurt by using his atomic breath. Almost like a metaphor, where you can't just use nuclear power because it hurts you as well. Metaphor. Yes. Main character, kamikaze pilot, is like, holy cow, that's the lizard I should have killed, and now it's on its way to Japan, I'm the worst. So basically, you have to, I won't spoil anything else, because you just gotta see the movie, it's so good. You'll cry. I'm not kidding, like in a Godzilla movie. Because let's just say that, like, a lot of it is metaphorical, and there's one part where, like, oh, this is like a metaphorical, like, atomic bombing scene, and then this thing happens, and I was like, oh, like, bleh, like tears. Oh my stars. It just like destroyed me. But again, like it deals with how do the people who are in the military deal with this? What do you fight for? There's a part where they're talking, like all these like military people are meeting, like what do we do? Like the government basically failed. The government threw lives away. It was way too cavalier with human life. But we also have to fight sometimes. It's just brilliant. It respects soldiers, but it also shows the flaws of the military. It shows the effect of violence and bombings on civilian populations. It's fantastic, okay? It's a fantastic movie, and Godzilla is a direct metaphor for all of it. Like, it's just fantastic. See it. And the anthropology behind it is like a deep care for the human person. That family matters and life matters and civilians matter, and that's why war is a tragedy. Like it shows you the goodness that war destroys. It shows you what you're fighting for and what you gain, what you might lose by throwing it away. It's fantastic. Now let's talk about Slaughterhouse-Five. Garbage book. Okay, sorry if you like that book, but let's just give you, so the premise of Slaughterhouse-Five, and I thought this would be a good book. I was excited to read it, and then I read it and I was like, oh. So the premise is that there's this guy named Billy Pilgrim who is a soldier in World War II and witnesses the Dresden bombing, again, civilian bombing, and he becomes unstuck in time, so he basically, like, jumps around in time, and he may or may not get abducted by aliens who are also unstuck in time. That sounds really interesting. I'm like, huh, interesting. I wonder what Kurt Vonnegut is going to do with these, like, sci-fi things and his story. Background, Vonnegut lived through the bombing of Dresden. Like, this is sort of a fictionalization of his own experience where he was in a slaughterhouse, like, underground. The city got bombed, like, wiped out with firebombing, and then he came out and was like, ugh, and had to experience that. Now, why he didn't write about that directly, who knows? But I feel like someone who experienced that could have written a better book about it. It's very, well, let's get to it. Okay, so I will tell you the chronological storyline rather than jumping around, just so we hear what actually happens in the book. Okay, so Billy Pilgrim is well, I can't really call him a character because he has no agency and no personality, and he might as well just be a sexy lamp or a non-sexy lamp. He just is there. He just kind of, stuff happens to him. I should also mention that whenever somebody dies or death is mentioned or someone, I don't even know, drives down a dead-end road, the narrator will be like, and so it goes. And it's extremely pretentious. So anyway, Billy Pilgrim is a soldier in World War II. He's hanging out with this awful human being, like garbage sadomasochist who just wants to kill and torture people, and these two gunners. They're Americans, by the way. They're traipsing through Germany. They get captured. The Germans send them to one prison camp where there's a bunch of British guys who are like, we're British. Oh, we drink tea. And then they send them to another camp, but the horrible sadomasochist dies on the way. And so it goes. I should mention that at the beginning of this book, there's a little, like, prologue where Vonnegut himself is, like, talking to his friend who also experienced Dresden and his wife, like, after the war. And she's like, how dare you write a book about the war? You're going to make everyone look like heroes, but they were babies. And I'm like, so in order to fulfill his promise to, like, not make them look like heroes and show that they were babies, he makes one character, like, an actual sadomasochist into torture. Continuing on. Billy Pilgrim is by himself. His friend died, and so it goes. He's in Dresden, and we're told that they, like, are working as prisoners of war, and they walk in on some high school girls showering, because that's important to the story. And then, he's already become unstuck in time, by the way. Nothing that happened, like, at the beginning of the book when they were in the forest, he was already unstuck in time. Remember that. Okay. They're in the slaughterhouse. Dresden gets bombed. They come outside. Everyone's dead. There's no survivors. It stinks horribly. They have to dig a pit to try and find survivors. They can't. It's gross. Moving on. Now, you might say, whoa, hold on, stop. What about Dresden? Doesn't matter. That's pretty much as much time in the book as Dresden is given. Moving on. They meet some German couple outside the town who are, like, walking with their horse. A bird says, toot, toot. Moving on. He moves back to America. He kind of has PTSD. In one scene, he cries by himself. He marries the, like, unattractive piano-legged woman that she's described this way, who's his boss's daughter, and he, quote, only cheated on her one time, unquote, by, like, sleeping with some random lady at an office party. Why are we told this? I don't know. He has a horrible shrew of a daughter. We're told this. She's just awful. Because, you know. And then he gets on an airplane that crashes with some people in it, and his wife is driving to the hospital and crashes her car and dies, and so it goes, and so it goes. And then he thinks that he's been abducted by aliens. So, like, at this point, it's unclear if the aliens are a metaphor or a hallucination or actually aliens. I should also mention that he really likes this weird author who's, like, maybe a Vonnegut stand-in, who's, like, a cantankerous weirdo who writes really pretentious sci-fi. He also visits an adult porn store and sees a video of this lady named Montana something. Is a porn actress. Okay. Anyway, he gets abducted by aliens, maybe, and they look like little hands with eyes in their hands, and they exist in the fourth dimension, and they don't experience time like regular people, and they kind of don't understand cause and effect, and when everyone dies, they're like, and so it goes, whatever, YOLO. And they abduct Billy Pilgrim, and they're interested that he also has become unstuck in time. And they also abduct Montana, whatever her name is, and she's like 20, and he's like 40, and they put them in a human zoo, and they're both naked, and she's like, let's sleep together, because, you know, why wouldn't you put that in the book? And they do, and, like, YOLO, and she has a baby, and then eventually Billy Pilgrim goes back to Earth, but, like, Montana's fine being there, whatever, and, Billy Pilgrim's shrew of a daughter tells him that he needs to stop being obsessed with aliens and thinking that it got abducted, and then he goes on a radio show and talks about being abducted, and about how people should, like, not care about cause and effect and become unstuck in time. The end. That's the book. Yes, technically speaking, Billy Pilgrim, like, goes back and forth in time, and that's all, like, not sequential, but it doesn't actually matter. The whole unstuck in time thing has nothing to do with anything. Anything. Nothing. Like, it doesn't add to the book, it doesn't have to do with the war, it has nothing to do with anything other than being incredibly pretentious. Sorry. It just doesn't work. Now, what about the aliens? Now, the aliens might be a metaphor. They might be PTSD, although they didn't come on until he had it, like... And that's the thing, too, is I'm like, is this about PTSD? Is it about the effect of the war on soldiers? No, because Billy Pilgrim was already unstuck in time, like, before all the horrible stuff happened. He was just traipsing through the woods without a personality. And he only started seeing aliens after he got in a plane wreck. Like, is this a metaphor? I don't know. But also the aliens, like... Are we supposed to agree with them or not? I have a feeling that we're not supposed to agree with them. Like, we're supposed to be like, no, human life does matter. Cause and effect does matter. Like, you can't just say, and so it goes when someone dies. You should care. And yet, because of the fail anthropology exhibited by Vonnegut, there's no reason for us to care. There's no reason for us to see the tragedy in someone's life or death. We're never given any reason to value any character or life in the book. All the male characters, well, let's see. One's a sadomasochist. I don't care that he's dead. One has zero personality. Billy Pilgrim has less personality and agency than Bella Swan, than Ender Wiggum, and even than Offred. Like, no agency. Nothing. There's no there. It's bizarre. Who cares if he lives or dies? And then you have, there's like one blustery general who like is pro-war, and honestly he's the most likable character in the thing because he has a personality. And then there's Kilgore Trout, I think, is the horrible, like, pretentious author in the book, and he's just a terrible person. And you're just like, am I supposed to care about any of these people? I guess the British soldiers were nice. They're cool. Now what about Dresden? We never spent any time there. We were never shown anything other than some, like, hot, naked high school girls. We're not shown anything to care about or feel tragedy for. And again, maybe that's all that Vonnegut experienced in Dresden. But see, this is a fictional story. You can actually put some things in that didn't happen. For example, maybe Billy Pilgrim, like, made friends with a German girl, and, like, maybe they couldn't even communicate, but, like, he knows that, like, she died, or he finds her body, or he doesn't find her body, but, like, obviously she died. Like, wouldn't that be sad? It would be sad. But no, we're told, like, in the story, a couple lines, it's like, oh, there were some high school girls who were bathing during the Dresden bombing, and they boiled to death. And I'm assuming that's why he talked about walking on them naked, to be like, oh, they're so beautiful, and then they boiled to death. And I'm like, see, objectively as a human, that should be horrifying. I'm just like, holy cow, like, it got so hot, ugh, right? Like, it should affect you. Objectively, it is. If I was reading a memoir, or a nonfiction book, or a better fiction book where that happened, I would be horrified. But I'm reading this book by Vonnegut, where every female character is a shrew, or ugly, or literally a sex object. Like, Montana, whatever her heck name is literally just a thing to have sex with. So I'm like, why would I care if these non-important humans called women boiled to death? Like, your anthropology is broken. Your anthropology does not show that you, Vonnegut, care about what actually happened. It's like show, don't tell. It's like show, don't tell. You're telling me I should be, like, really broken up about Dresden and the people there, but you're not showing me the actual people there and how their lives were destroyed. Like, how do you... And again, I'm like, it's kind of actually a masterpiece if you think about it, because he actually manages to show what the stupid Tralfamadorian hand aliens think about the world. Like, he literally shows, like, this book is their vision where life doesn't matter and cause and effect doesn't matter, and, like, and so it goes. Which I don't think is what he meant. I'm thinking he wanted this to be an anti-war book, but it's not anti-war because it's like, I don't care. Also, while Godzilla Minus One is like, here's some things that soldiers like dealt with. Here's some things that civilians dealt with. Like, and again, like the kamikaze pilot is not the only soldier in that story. Like there's a bunch of people, like again, the other guys on the boat. It shows all the different facets of like what soldiers are experiencing. Whereas Billy Pilgrim like didn't experience what most soldiers experience. Like he's barely a soldier. He got captured and then he saw some gross stuff. Like that's not really a poignant like commentary on soldiers, you know? Oh, they're just babies. I'm like, okay, then show us. Then show us someone who started out like, you know, an innocent, wide-eyed kid and then got like horribly like scarred by the war, like psychologically. You didn't. You gave us no personality, who then ends up with no personality, who occasionally cries, but that's not a personality. And you gave us a sadomasochist kid who dies. And I'm like, that's nothing. That's nothing. And as for the civilians, again, like, Godzilla Minus One is like the neighbor lady, the little girl, the lady who ends up staying with him. Like, their lives are deeply affected by the war. And I like, oh my gosh, like, you'll cry. Oh my gosh, it's so good. It actually, like, makes you feel something and shows you, like, how they suffered and what they're losing and what they lost and what they might lose again. Naked high school girls. I don't know. They were really pretty. Like, that doesn't show you anything. Like, make them characters. Make them people. And worst of all, no, that's all the worst of all. But also bad is the fact of, like, the sci-fi elements of Godzilla is a, like, metaphor for nuclear power and nuclear energy and bombing and war and everything. Like, underlining it of, like, it's just, like, it's so good. But also, like, not heavy-handed. Like, it's, like, really well done because, like, he's also a lizard. He's also a giant, like, kaiju. Like, yes, it's tactfully done, but it also relates to the message. Whereas the Trothamadorians, like, are we not supposed to care about war? Are we not supposed to care about human life? And the whole Unstuck in Time thing adds nothing. It's just pretentious. It's garbage. It's garbage. Okay, so, sorry, this is a rant, but also a rave, because Godzilla Minus One is great. If you really like Godzilla, watch Godzilla Minus One Minus Color, which is in black and white, but they didn't just desaturate it. They, like, went into each scene and made it look, like, perfect and adjusted the shadows and everything. Yeah. I haven't seen it, but my aunt was saying, and she's not a Godzilla fan, but she was like, it's actually, like, more, like, emotional and poignant. So, yeah. Godzilla Minus One is great. Watch it. Eschew Slaughterhouse-Five. Hooray! See you next time. Bye!